Lando dominates Quali as Verstappen and Oscar are behind. Ferrari is looking good for the rest of the races. Let's get into the latest F1 news. What's up, Formula One fanatics? Hold on to your helmets because we just witnessed something absolutely insane at the Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez. Lando Norris has completely demolished the competition in qualifying for the Mexican Grand Prix, leaving both Max Verstappen and his own teammate Oscar Piastri in the dust. And trust me, when I say demolished, I mean it was a masterclass in speed that nobody saw coming. Now, before we dive into the juicy details of how this all went down, let me tell you why this qualifying session might just change everything we thought we knew about the championship battle. Because what happened today wasn't just about lap times. It was about momentum, psychology, and the kind of statement that can shift an entire season. Let's set the scene first. Mexico City, altitude of over 7,000 feet. Thin air that makes these Formula One engines behave completely differently than anywhere else on the calendar. The Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez is notorious for surprises, and today it delivered one of the biggest shocks of the season. Coming into qualifying, all eyes were on the championship dynamics. Piastri entered as the Drivers' Championship leader, but he's been struggling recently. His Friday practice sessions were underwhelming at best, and you could sense the pressure mounting. Meanwhile, Verstappen was doing what Verstappen does best, quietly plotting his charge toward what would be an unprecedented fifth world title. The Dutchman has this uncanny ability to peak when it matters most, and many expected him to turn up the heat in Mexico. But here's where the story gets fascinating. While everyone was watching Verstappen and worrying about Piastri's form, Lando Norris was building something special. The Brit had been consistently quick throughout practice, topping the timing sheets in the final session with a confidence that suggested something big was brewing. The qualifying format always creates drama, but today felt different. From the very first runs in Q1, Norris wasn't just fast, he was in a different league entirely. His car looked planted, balanced, and most importantly, he looked completely at ease behind the wheel. Meanwhile, both Verstappen and Piastri seemed to be fighting their machinery more than usual. What made Norris's performance even more remarkable was how he handled the pressure. This is Mexico, where the long, straight down to turn one means pole position doesn't guarantee race victory. In fact, legendary driver Jacques Villeneuve has repeatedly emphasized that starting from pole here can actually be a disadvantage because of that massive slipstream opportunity for cars behind. But here's the twist that nobody anticipated. While conventional wisdom says pole position is tricky in Mexico, recent history tells a completely different story. The last 5 races here have all been won from pole position, completely contradicting the traditional thinking about this circuit. So suddenly, Norris's qualifying dominance takes on even greater significance. The way he built his performance throughout the session was textbook. In Q1, he was quick but not showing his full hand. Q2 saw him ramp up the pace, but still keeping something in reserve. Then came Q3, and that's when Norris unleashed something truly special. His pole position lap was a thing of beauty. Through the technical sections in the middle of the lap, he was finding grip where others couldn't. The high-speed corners that usually favor Red Bull's aerodynamic efficiency became Norris's playground. By the time he crossed the finish line, the gap to second place was so significant that it left everyone speechless. For Verstappen, this has to sting. The reigning world champion thrives on these moments where he can demonstrate why he's considered one of the greatest talents in motorsport history. But today, he simply didn't have the pace to match what Norris was producing. The Red Bull looked good, competitive even. But it wasn't enough to deal with whatever magic McLaren had found. Piastri's situation is perhaps even more concerning for his championship aspirations. The Australian has been the standout performer for much of this season, showing the kind of consistency and speed that championship leaders need. But form is temporary, and his recent struggles are becoming a genuine worry. Being outqualified by your teammate by such a margin when you're leading the championship adds a layer of pressure that can be difficult to handle. What makes this qualifying result so significant goes beyond just grid positions for tomorrow's race. It's about psychological momentum in a championship fight that's getting more intense by the weekend. Norris has just served notice that he's not content to play a supporting role in this title battle. His McLaren team has given him a weapon, and he's clearly ready to use it. The technical aspects of what happened today will be analyzed for weeks. Mexico's unique conditions often produce surprising results, but the way Norris adapted to the altitude and thin air was masterful. While others struggled with balance and grip, he seemed to thrive in conditions that typically level the playing field. Looking ahead to tomorrow's race, this qualifying performance changes everything. Norris starts from the best position, but he'll have both championship contenders breathing down his neck, desperate to recover from this setback. The long run to turn 1 will be crucial, but more importantly, Norris has proven today that when it matters most, he can deliver performances that leave even the very best drivers looking for answers. This might just be the moment we look back on as the turning point in one of the most compelling championship battles in recent memory. The Formula One championship fight has taken a dramatic turn, and right now, Oscar Piastri finds himself in the hot seat with everything to lose. After a disastrous weekend in Austin that had fans questioning whether the young Australian can handle the pressure of a title fight, McLaren has finally revealed what went wrong with his car. But the answer might surprise you. Picture this. You're leading the World Championship. Your teammate is breathing down your neck just 14 points behind. And Max Verstappen, the 4-time world champion, is lurking only 40 points back after winning 3 of the last 4 races. That's exactly where Oscar Piastri finds himself heading into the Mexico City Grand Prix, and the pressure is absolutely crushing. The Austin weekend was a nightmare scenario for any championship leader. Piastri was consistently 0.3 of a second slower than his teammate Lando Norris, which in Formula One terms is basically an eternity. When you're fighting for a world title, every 100th of a second matters, and losing 0.3 to your own teammate is like showing up to a knife fight with a spoon. But here's where the story gets really interesting. After Austin, McLaren team principal Andrea Stella ordered a complete forensic investigation of Piastri's car. They stripped everything down, analyzed every component, checked every sensor, and basically turned the car inside out, looking for the smoking gun that explained why their championship leader suddenly looked like he was driving through treacle. The result of this intensive investigation? Absolutely nothing. Well, nothing dramatically wrong anyway. Speaking at the Mexico City Grand Prix press conference, Piastri himself confirmed that McLaren found no major mechanical issues with his car. No broken parts, no faulty sensors, no mysterious gremlins hiding in the electronics. The car was fundamentally fine. So, if the car wasn't broken, what exactly happened in Austin? This is where the story becomes a masterclass in the psychological warfare that defines Formula One championship battles. The answer lies not in mechanical failure, but in something far more human and relatable: overthinking under pressure. The Circuit of the Americas presents a unique challenge that separates the wheat from the chaff. The track features demanding high-speed S's, a brutal sequence of corners from turn 15 through 18, and traction zones that punish any driver who isn't fully committed. Most crucially, the tire degradation characteristics are completely counterintuitive. Here's where racing becomes more art than science. Normally, when tires start overheating, the logical response is to back off and preserve them. It's like easing up on your car's engine when it starts overheating. But Austin demands the opposite approach. Drivers need to push harder, not softer, and accept that the car will feel snappy and unpredictable. It's like learning to dance with chaos. The theory emerging from McLaren's investigation suggests that Piastri fell into the classic championship leader's trap. With so much at stake, he became overly conservative, trying to protect his tires when he should have been attacking the track. While his rivals were embracing the car's instability and pushing through the low-grip conditions, Piastri was driving like someone afraid to scratch the paint on a borrowed Ferrari. This conservative approach created a vicious cycle. The more cautiously he drove, the more the tires overheated anyway, because that's just what happens at Austin. But instead of adapting and becoming more aggressive, the gap to his competitors kept growing, which likely made him even more tentative. It's the racing equivalent of choking under pressure, and it happens to the best of them. Andrea Stella didn't mince words when discussing the situation. He identified this as one of Piastri's key weaknesses: the ability to lean on the car and extract performance when grip levels are compromised. In Formula One, there's nowhere to hide from your weaknesses, especially when you're fighting for the biggest prize in motorsport. But here's what makes this story compelling. rather than just concerning for Piastri fans. Stella emphasized that this represents an opportunity for improvement, and crucially, he expects Piastri to learn from this experience quickly. The McLaren boss revealed they had already conducted detailed conversations with Piastri about how to approach these challenging conditions differently. The beauty of Formula One is that every race weekend offers a chance at redemption. Mexico City presents completely different challenges to Austin. The high altitude affects aerodynamics and engine performance in unique ways, but the tire degradation characteristics are more conventional. If Piastri can reset mentally and return to the aggressive driving style that got him to the championship lead in the first place, this Austin blip could become nothing more than a learning experience. What makes this championship fight so captivating is that all three drivers still in contention have shown they can crack under pressure. Norris has had his moments of inconsistency. Verstappen is dealing with a car that's clearly not the fastest anymore, and now Piastri has shown he can overthink himself into trouble. The next few races will reveal whether Piastri has the mental fortitude to handle being hunted rather than hunting. Championship pressure has broken stronger drivers than him, but it's also forged legends. With McLaren confident they've identified the problem and Piastri expressing optimism about Mexico, this championship fight is far from over. The stage is set for one of the most compelling title battles in recent memory, where the winner might not be the fastest driver, but the one who can best manage the pressure when it matters most. What if I told you that one of Formula One's greatest champions might be facing his worst season ever? Lewis Hamilton just dropped a bombshell that has the entire F1 world talking, and it reveals everything about his nightmare Ferrari debut. Picture this: a 7-time world champion, arguably the most successful driver in modern Formula One history, sitting in his car after practice and telling reporters he absolutely refuses to race the machine he's been given. That's exactly what happened in Mexico City, and Hamilton's blunt honesty is sending shockwaves through the paddock. After Friday's practice sessions at the Mexican Grand Prix, Hamilton delivered perhaps the most damning verdict any driver has given about their own car this season. When asked about his Ferrari's performance, he didn't mince words. He categorically does not want to race the car in its current state. This isn't just frustration talking. This is a champion who has reached his breaking point. The numbers tell part of the story. Hamilton finished 5th in second practice, just 3/10 behind Max Verstappen's pace-setting time. On paper, that looks respectable. But Hamilton's reaction reveals the deeper truth about what it's like behind the wheel of that Ferrari. He described the car as sliding around constantly, with a balance so problematic that finding grip becomes an impossible task at Mexico's high altitude. What makes this situation even more remarkable is Hamilton's complete absence from the opening practice session. While his teammate Charles Leclerc topped the timesheet, Hamilton watched from the sidelines as Antonio Fuoco took his place for a mandatory young driver session. Coming into the weekend already on the back foot, Hamilton then discovered his car was virtually undrivable in its current setup. The altitude at Mexico City creates unique challenges. Teams run high downforce configurations to compensate for the thin air, yet grip levels feel even lower than at Monza, where cars run minimal downforce. Hamilton compared the sensation to rally driving, except rally cars are designed to slide around corners, while Formula One cars depend on precise balance and maximum grip to extract performance. This struggle represents more than just a bad weekend. Hamilton's move to Ferrari was supposed to be a fairy tale ending to his career, a chance to add an 8th world championship with the sport's most iconic team. Instead, it's become a nightmare that could see him record his first season without a single podium finish, an unprecedented low for a driver of his caliber. The statistics are staggering. Hamilton already holds the unwanted record for most races by a new Ferrari driver without reaching the podium. Every weekend that passes without a breakthrough extends this dubious achievement. When a reporter casually mentioned it had been a long day in Mexico, Hamilton's response was telling, "It's been a long year." That simple exchange captures everything about Hamilton's Ferrari experience. The frustration, the disappointment, the grinding reality that even legends can find themselves in uncompetitive machinery. This isn't the Hamilton we're used to seeing, the confident, composed champion who has conquered every challenge thrown his way. Behind the scenes, Hamilton and his engineers face a crucial overnight session to completely overhaul the car's setup. He acknowledges there's always risk in making dramatic changes. but his position is clear. Anything is better than racing the current configuration. This represents a gamble that could either salvage his weekend or make things even worse. The competitive landscape adds another layer of complexity. While Hamilton struggles with his Ferrari's balance, McLaren continues to demonstrate superior race pace. His teammate Charles Leclerc finished ahead of both McLaren drivers in practice, yet Hamilton suspects they're holding back their true performance. The psychological impact of watching packed PPS. Rivals pull away, while you're fighting an unbalanced car, cannot be understated. Hamilton's technical feedback reveals the specific nature of his problems. The long-run balance wasn't catastrophic, but extracting maximum performance from the tires remains elusive. He knows there's more speed hidden in the car, but accessing it requires solving fundamental setup issues that have plagued him throughout the season. What makes this situation particularly poignant is Hamilton's age and career stage. At 40 years old, every season becomes more precious. He didn't leave Mercedes and join Ferrari to slide around in an uncompetitive car. He came to add to his championship tally and cement his legacy with motorsport's most legendary team. The broader implications extend beyond one weekend in Mexico. Hamilton's public criticism of his car's setup sends a message throughout the Ferrari organization. This isn't a driver making excuses. It's a champion demanding the tools necessary to compete at the highest level. His willingness to speak so candidly demonstrates both his frustration and his determination to find solutions. As Saturday approaches, Hamilton faces a crossroads. The overnight setup work could transform his weekend, providing the balanced platform he needs to showcase his legendary racecraft. Alternatively, the changes could backfire, leaving him even further from contention. Either way, his refusal to accept the status quo shows that even in his most difficult season, Lewis Hamilton remains a fighter unwilling to compromise on his standards. This story transcends one practice session or one weekend. It's about legacy, expectations, and what happens when even the greatest champions face seemingly impossible challenges. What if I told you that one driver's incredible comeback has completely changed how an entire Formula One team manages their championship battle? You're about to discover how Max Verstappen's relentless pursuit of a fifth title just forced McLaren to throw their internal team strategy completely out the window. Picture this scene. Just 4 weekends ago, McLaren looked unstoppable. They had both drivers sitting pretty at the top of the championship standings, with what seemed like an almost guaranteed 1-2 finish for the season. Oscar Piastri was leading the championship, Lando Norris was sitting comfortably in second place, and Max Verstappen appeared to be mathematically out of contention. The Papaya cars were dominant, the Constructors' Championship was already wrapped up, and McLaren's first driver's title since Lewis Hamilton in 2008 seemed like a done deal. But here's where this story takes a dramatic turn that nobody saw coming. In just 4 race weekends, Verstappen has completely rewritten the championship narrative with one of the most ruthless comebacks in recent Formula One history. We're talking about a driver who scored 101 points out of a maximum possible 108 points across these 4 weekends. That's not just good racing, that's championship-level dominance when it matters most. Let me break down exactly how devastating this run has been. Verstappen won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, dominated in Baku, conquered Austin with both the Grand Prix victory and the sprint race win. Each victory didn't just add points to his tally, it systematically chipped away at what seemed like an insurmountable McLaren advantage. The psychological impact has been just as significant as the mathematical one. The numbers tell an incredible story of momentum shift. Verstappen has outscored Norris by 44 points during this 4-race stretch, and championship leader Piastri by a massive 64 points. Remember, this is the same driver who was 104 points behind Piastri after the Dutch Grand Prix. Most experts had already written off his championship chances at that point. The deficit seemed too large, the remaining races too few. Now, here's where McLaren's internal drama becomes absolutely fascinating. After a collision between Norris and Piastri at the Singapore Grand Prix, McLaren had imposed what they called marginal sporting consequences on Norris. While the team kept the exact details private, paddock sources suggested this meant Piastri would receive priority treatment during qualifying sessions for the remaining races. It was McLaren's way of managing their two championship contenders while maintaining team harmony. But then something unexpected happened at the Circuit of the Americas. During the sprint race, the two McLaren drivers found themselves involved in a multi-car incident, with Piastri inadvertently collecting Norris in the chaos. Both cars were eliminated from the race, and suddenly McLaren's internal punishment system looked problematic. How do you penalize one driver when both drivers are making costly mistakes? This is where Verstappen's influence becomes crystal clear. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella made a decision that reveals just how seriously they now take the Red Bull threat. They completely wiped Norris's punishment slate clean. No more priority for Piastri, no more internal consequences, no more complex team management strategies. Just pure focus on stopping Verstappen's championship charge. Stella's explanation was remarkably candid when he addressed the media. He acknowledged that McLaren reviews everything in an open and constructive manner, but their conclusion was simple. The best approach moving forward was starting with a clean slate and focusing entirely on ensuring the driver's championship stays with McLaren. Everything else, according to Stella, is less important because someone is coming with tremendous momentum, and their mission is stopping that momentum. The psychological warfare aspect of this situation cannot be understated. Verstappen has positioned himself perfectly with 5 races remaining. He's now just 40 points behind Piastri and only 26 points down on Norris. What seemed impossible just a month ago now appears entirely achievable. This isn't just about mathematical possibilities anymore. It's about momentum, confidence, and the kind of pressure that can make championship contenders crack. McLaren finds themselves in a fascinating strategic dilemma. They have 2 drivers capable of winning the championship, but maintaining their internal competition might actually hand the title to their biggest external threat. By removing Norris's punishment and creating equal treatment, they're essentially betting that their combined strength can overcome Verstappen's individual excellence. The historical context makes this even more compelling. McLaren hasn't won a driver's championship since 2008 with Hamilton, and their last 1-2 finish in the standings dates back to 1989 when Alain Prost beat teammate Ayrton Senna. The pressure to end this drought is enormous. But now they're facing a driver who has already proven he can win 4 consecutive championships and knows exactly how to handle pressure situations. Verstappen's comeback represents everything that makes Formula One captivating. One driver's refusal to accept defeat has fundamentally altered how an entire championship contending team operates. McLaren's decision to abandon their internal discipline system isn't just about fairness between teammates. It's an acknowledgement that Verstappen has become the primary threat that requires their complete attention. The next 5 races will determine whether McLaren's strategic pivot proves successful or whether Verstappen's incredible momentum carries him to an unprecedented 5th consecutive championship. What's certain is that no one can count out Max Verstappen until the mathematical possibility completely disappears. His influence on this championship battle extends far beyond his own performance, reshaping how his competitors approach their entire strategy. Wait, hold on. Did Max Verstappen just say he's not going to win at Mexico? The 4-time world champion who's been staging one of the most incredible comebacks in Formula One history just made a shocking admission that has everyone in the paddock talking. But here's the crazy part. He said this right after topping practice sessions. So what's really going on here? Let me break down exactly what happened in Mexico City that has Verstappen so worried, and why this could change everything in the championship fight that's been keeping us all on the edge of our seats. So picture this. Max rolls up to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, sitting just 40 points behind championship leader Oscar Piastri. He's been absolutely flying lately, winning 3 out of the last 4 races since Monza. The Red Bull finally looks like the machine we remember from their dominant years. Everything seems to be falling into place for another miraculous Verstappen title run. But then Friday practice happens, and suddenly we're seeing a completely different story unfold. Now, Verstappen didn't even drive in the first practice session because Red Bull had to fulfill their mandatory rookie driver requirement. They put Arvid Lindblad in the car instead. So Max was basically going into Friday afternoon completely blind about how his car would handle this unique Mexican circuit. When he finally got behind the wheel for second practice, something incredible happened on the surface. He immediately went fastest, beating Charles Leclerc and that impressive rookie Kimi Antonelli by over 0.2 of a second. His title rival Lando Norris could only manage 4th place. On paper, this looked like vintage Verstappen dominance. But here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. After that session, instead of celebrating or showing his usual confidence, Max dropped a bombshell that nobody saw coming. He straight up admitted that despite the quick lap time, everything else was terrible. And I mean terrible. He said the soft tire lap was decent, but everything beyond that single flying lap was absolutely dreadful. The medium tires felt horrible on short runs, but the real nightmare was the long runs. This is where it gets really concerning for Red Bull fans. Long run pace is everything in Formula One. You can qualify on pole position, but if you can't maintain competitive lap times when the fuel loads are heavy and the tires start degrading, you're going to get eaten alive on race day. Verstappen described the sensation as having absolutely zero grip once the car got into longer stints. He said the tires would overheat almost immediately, and they just had no pace whatsoever compared to their competitors. This is particularly alarming at Mexico City, where the thin air already makes tire management incredibly tricky. The really striking part was how brutally honest Max was about the situation. He admitted he didn't even know what was causing these long-run issues. It wasn't just that the car balance was off. That's something they can usually fix with setup changes. Instead, he described it as having no grip at all, which suggests something much more fundamental is wrong. And then came the quote that's making headlines everywhere. Verstappen looked directly at the cameras and said, "You're not going to win the race like that." He emphasized that being fast over one lap means absolutely nothing if you have zero race pace. This level of pessimism from a driver who's built his reputation on never giving up is genuinely shocking. But let's talk about what this means for the championship battle, because the implications are massive. Verstappen has been staging what many are calling the greatest comeback in Formula One history. Remember, earlier this season, Red Bull looked like they were in serious trouble. The car was handling terribly. Max was visibly frustrated, and it seemed like McLaren and Ferrari had completely surpassed them in development. Then, something magical happened around Monza. Red Bull seemed to unlock something in their car setup, and suddenly, Verstappen was back to his winning ways. 3 victories in 4 races had him charging back up the championship standings, turning what looked like a lost cause into a genuine fight for a 5th title. With 5 races and 2 sprint weekends remaining, every single point matters enormously. A bad weekend in Mexico could essentially end his championship hopes, especially with how strong McLaren has been looking lately. Speaking of McLaren, they're the team everyone was talking about after practice. While Verstappen was struggling with race pace, McLaren was being praised specifically for their long-run speed. This is exactly the opposite of what Red Bull needed to see. If McLaren can convert that practice pace into race day performance, they could extend their championship lead significantly. The Mexico City circuit presents unique challenges that might be exposing fundamental weaknesses in the Red Bull package. The high altitude means reduced aerodynamic downforce and different engine performance characteristics. The track surface can be quite abrasive, leading to high tire degradation. If Red Bull's car simply isn't suited to these conditions, it could be a very long weekend indeed. What makes this situation even more intriguing is how McLaren has been handling their driver situation. They've maintained their policy of not interfering with their drivers' racing, which could actually help Verstappen if the McLaren drivers take points off each other. But if one of them runs away with the victory while Max struggles in the midfield, the championship math becomes very difficult very quickly. The technical side of this story is fascinating too. Red Bull brought a 4-part upgrade package to Mexico specifically to help Verstappen's title charge. But if these upgrades aren't working as expected, or if they're somehow making the car worse over longer distances, that represents a massive strategic miscalculation. So here's what we're watching for in the rest of the Mexico weekend. Can Red Bull's engineers figure out what's causing these race pace issues? Will Verstappen's legendary adaptability help him extract performance from a difficult car? Or are we about to witness the end of one of the greatest championship comebacks before it even reaches its climax? The next few days in Mexico City might just determine whether we're looking at champion number 5 for Max Verstappen or the beginning of the end for his remarkable career-defining comeback attempt. What if I told you that one of Formula One's greatest champions just delivered the reality check that could completely change how we see the 2025 title race. While everyone's getting swept up in Max Verstappen mania, Fernando Alonso just dropped some truth bombs that might surprise you. Picture this. Max Verstappen was trailing by over 100 points just a few races ago. Now he's clawed back to within 40 points of the championship lead, with 5 races left. The comeback story writes itself, right? Well, not so fast, according to the two-time world champion. Let me paint the full picture for you. Oscar Piastri sits at the top of the standings with 346 points. His McLaren teammate Lando Norris trails by 14 points in second place. Then there's Max Verstappen, the defending champion, sitting 40 points behind Piastri but surging fast after an incredible run of form. The numbers tell an amazing story. Verstappen has collected 101 points from the maximum possible 108 inches his last 4 race weekends. He scored back-to-back victories at Monza and Baku, finished second in Singapore, then absolutely dominated in Austin with a perfect weekend of sprint and Grand Prix wins. Everyone's talking about momentum, the psychological advantage, how Verstappen might be getting inside the heads of the McLaren drivers. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff even suggested that being the underdog gives Max a mental edge, pointing to how cautious Lando Norris looked during his battles in Austin. But here's where Fernando Alonso steps in with his ice-cold reality check. When asked directly if Verstappen was in the heads of the McLaren drivers, the Spaniard's response was swift and definitive. Absolutely not. Alonso's perspective cuts through all the hype with surgical precision. He sees this championship fight as something that changes not just weekend by weekend, but day by day. One day, Verstappen looks unstoppable. The next day, McLaren could win by 30 seconds with Norris first, and Piastri second, and suddenly Max's chances evaporate. This insight comes from someone who's been in the thick of championship battles. Alonso knows what it feels like to fight for titles, to experience the swings in momentum, the psychological pressure, the technical variables that can flip everything upside down overnight. Here's the crucial part of Alonso's assessment that everyone needs to understand. While he acknowledges that Verstappen's recent performances have been exceptional, he emphasizes that car performance will ultimately determine who takes home the championship trophy. The driver can only do so much when the machinery underneath isn't delivering. Think about what this means for the remaining 5 race weekends. Verstappen needs to outscore Piastri by an average of 8 points per race to claim his 5th consecutive title. Against Norris, he needs just over 5 points per race. Those might seem like manageable numbers given his recent form, but Alonso's warning rings clear. The car decides everything. Red Bull has found something in their setup recently. They've made upgrades and gained a better understanding of their machine. Verstappen himself admitted that if you'd told him during the Dutch Grand Prix that he'd be fighting for the title, he would have called you crazy. The turnaround has been that dramatic. But here's what makes this championship fight so compelling and unpredictable. McLaren isn't standing still. They're making their own adjustments, their own strategic decisions. The technical development race continues parallel to the on-track battle. Verstappen's recent dominance shows what's possible when everything clicks. His Austin weekend was masterful, winning the sprint from pole position, then repeating the performance in the Grand Prix. 2 lights to flag victories that demonstrated both his skill and Red Bull's improved package. Yet Alonso's measured perspective reminds us that Formula One championships aren't won by momentum alone. They're won by consistency, reliability, and having the fastest car when it matters most. The psychological games and media narratives make for great stories, but lap times and points ultimately decide championships. The mathematics still favor the McLaren drivers. Piastri leads for good reason. He's been consistently scoring strong points throughout the season. Norris sits second because he's delivered when needed. Verstappen's deficit exists because Red Bull struggled for much of the early season. What we're witnessing is fascinating from a sporting perspective. Can Verstappen complete one of the most remarkable championship comebacks in recent memory? Or will McLaren's season-long consistency prove decisive? Alonso suggests we shouldn't get too caught up in the current narrative because it could all change tomorrow. The veteran's words serve as a reminder that in Formula One, nothing is guaranteed until the checkered flag falls in Abu Dhabi. Car performance fluctuates between circuits. Technical issues can strike anywhere. Strategic mistakes can cost crucial points. weather can shuffle the competitive order. So while the Verstappen hype train gathers steam and the comeback story captures imaginations worldwide, Fernando Alonso offers the perspective that only comes from decades of experience at the highest level. This championship fight isn't over, but it's far from decided either way. The reality check is simple. Forget the psychology, ignore the momentum talk, and focus on what really matters: which team brings the fastest car to each remaining circuit.